Welcome to the Rant Live. You know, back when we started this show in 2020, it was April of 2020, I believe, right in the middle of the pandemic, and we decided to name it The Rant. And little did we know how appropriate that our title of the show would actually be.
Cool.
Man, for years and years, and we're going. I mean, obviously, we haven't been doing it for that long, but it's a couple years now, and yet here we are in the off season, the much anticipated off season of 2022. After an above 500 second half, a lot of things to feel good about going into the off season, even though the Cubs' final record wasn't great. And a lot of promises and assurances from the front office about the things that needed to be done and things that were going to be done, and et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of just like a record that's on repeat, to be quite honest with you, because this seems like a trend for the Cubs front office. They come out and they identify what needs to be done, and all the fans and people like us, bloggers, sit and look at them and nod our heads and say, yeah, that's you got it. And then what they end up doing is baffling and makes absolutely no sense and doesn't correlate at all to any of the things that they talked about that we all agreed to.
Yeah, and this year, excuse me, this year though has the extra added wrinkle of the business operations side apparently just driving a bus back and forth over Jed Hoyer at the same time. Because I put this out in a tweet late last night, and I was like, because initially we got this word that there's some reports that, hey, Jed Hoyer has been given a green light to spend what it'll take, and we're like, sweet, man.
More good news.
Yeah, that's like Dexter Fowler leading off Game 7 with the homer. And then there's even reports that they might sign 2 shortstops. Like, holy crap, David Ross just homered in his last at-bat ever. Oh, my God, this is amazing. The Cubs are going to win the World Series. And ever since then, it's just been like Rajai Davis hitting home run after home run after home run after home run because we have to relive Monday night. And then it's just been getting shit on for the last week. Oh, yeah. So somebody made note of I gotta make a change here real quick. I'll be right back. There we go. Okay. We got to switch it up. People who are watching it.
You can just drag yourself. You can pick yourself
I know,
up and drag it.
I could do that, but I don't know if I'm working with my defunct keyboard here. So sometimes the mouse doesn't work as well as what I need it to if I'm not operating with a wireless. But yeah, but not only all of that, right? And I mentioned that because what we've heard before is we've heard the intelligent spending thing. We've heard, making improvements, but we've also frequently heard the business side of things talking about how, it was going to take a few years for Marquee Sports Network to get up and running to where they wanted it to. We've heard Tom Ricketts talk about biblical losses and talking about, and we could go into that because what's really funny is that they're talking about trying to spend at the same time as we know that Marquee's ratings are way down. It's not making nearly as much money as they needed it to. Obviously we could have a whole weekly episode about that and just how badly they screwed the pooch on getting that thing set up. But at least we've had these tempered expectations of okay, they're not going to go out and sign this monster contract because but this time we've got Crane Kenny, not just reports, but going on the air on 670 Score, the Cubs flagship station, and saying, we've got a lot of money. Jed's got a lot of money to spend. We're going to be a playoff team. We expect to be a playoff team in 2023. He's got the money to spend. And now that paints Hoyer into a corner because there's a bunch of different ways we could take this. And I don't want to sidetrack this whole thing. I'd love to follow a couple of these rabbit trails eventually, depending on how it works. But you've got this mix between, he's got money to spend, but how much are you really giving him? It reminds me of there's the meme from Arrested Development where it's it's a banana, Michael. How much could it cost? $100, whatever it is. Just showing that the people involved are completely out of touch with the cost of everyday things. How much does he really have money to go out and sign the guys that he needs to at the way the market is going? That's one thing. But this does put it out there like, hey, we've given you money. We expect a winner. Now what happens if he doesn't do it? Or what happens if he does spend money and they don't win? Like, Hoyer is in a very unenviable position. And I wrote a little bit about this last night. I tweeted about it. We can go there. But what are your thoughts on where do you feel like Hoyer is being set up to fail? Or is this just kind of an overall just clusterfuck that, pardon my French, but and we've dropped F-bombs here before, but that everybody bears blame in?
Well, I mean, he's guilty by association going all the way back to what Theo Epstein didn't do following the 2017 season, and the signings that happened there. He was part of that, right? And so, if he was all new, if he had just come in last year and that was his first year, then yeah, I think you could give him a little bit more leeway. But the thing is that he was part of, the Theo Jed combo. That
Stoyer.
Yeah, that kind of got the Cubs in this position in the first place. And so, yes, I do believe he should be held accountable. You look at what happened last season. I think he made some decent signings, and he set himself up for what could be a good year and what should be a playoff run this year. And then, he comes out of the box and says, kind of, we need to this intelligent spending thing. To me, that's not intelligent spending shouldn't mean ignorance and doing things that don't make any sense. And that's really where we are right now, which is you see the things that have happened. I mean, Vasquez to the Twins, 3 years, $30 million is the biggest, most baffling thing to me, because how the Cubs couldn't pull that off is well beyond me. I mean, $10 million a year, give me a break. That's free. In baseball terms, that's almost free. And so it's like, would that have been the key marquee signing that they needed? No, but it would have at least sent what it does is it sends a message to Cubs fans that they're not even willing to be thrifty, because 3 years,
with
$30
a
million.
position of need, right? With a position of need that you just lost your primary catcher. Even
so
if you
what's
look
the
at
plan?
Gomes as a timeshare, right? And Gomes
So
is only under contract for one more year. Nobody knows, and that's
it Miguel Amaya? Who's injured?
Yeah, and it was so funny because I had to explain this to somebody. I've actually had a really good run over the last week or so of making sense to people on Facebook, because somebody was trying to be like, "Oh, it's Miguel Amaya," and I was like, "Well, he's got to stay healthy." It's like, "Well, he was healthy. He came back." I was like, "No."
In the past 3 years, he's been healthy. He's played like 20 games.
I was like, "You're correct in that he did come back from the Tommy John and was hitting and not catching." I said, "But he suffered a Liz Frank injury in his foot, a broken bone in his foot that kept him out of the Arizona Fall League. He just got out of a boot like earlier in the week. This is not a guy who we're sitting there going like, oh yeah, man, totally healthy track record. He's barely played in the last 3 years." But here's what I kind of wonder about here. And the problem, if you have no trust, that's part of the reason Theo Epstein left. And Theo made a lot of mistakes on his own, right? Particularly holding on to players, not properly, getting the right guys around. And now part of that was they didn't have the money for it. But if you look back, and I included this in the piece about Vasquez, because I had tweeted some stuff and I wanted to get those thoughts out there. When I wrote about that signing, I also added some things in there just about kind of where it feels like maybe, and some of this I kind of borrowed from Sahadev Sharma, so I'm not going to try to act like this is all my own stuff, but I've been thinking about this, in that, there's a concern that, like with anything else, right? It feels like one of the housing boom where you get all these people who bought way more house than they could afford, and then a couple years later, they ended up getting evicted or moving out on their own because they could no longer afford the house. They bought a place they couldn't, they couldn't maintain the mortgage on. Similarly, how much of this is Hoyer going? Now, granted, there's so much money falling off the books next year that I don't necessarily agree with the idea that he shouldn't spend for this fear. But if you look back at what Theo Epstein said right after the Yu Darvish signing, so this is like February of 18, right? And the Cubs were carrying a pretty high payroll and all that stuff. And Hoyer Epstein was admitting at the time, right, that yes, this does reduce our overall financial flexibility if there's some other moves we want to make. we'll have to be careful about that. But he specifically, without saying Bryce Harper, he was talking about Bryce Harper. He was like, if that perfect player comes along who's that great fit and who wants to be here and all this stuff, there will be money to make that happen. We'll be able to make that happen. That was in February of 2018. However, in the offseason following that campaign, when Bryce Harper was a free agent, as well, the Cubs couldn't engage with him. They did not have the money. I fully believe ownership moved the goalposts on Epstein after that season. I have no doubt in my mind that that's what happened. Pulled the rug out from under him, and Hoyer was obviously part of that front office. And I really think, whether you want to call it PTSD or what, he's Charlie Brown, right? And he's going like, man, Lucy's telling me to kick this ball, and I don't know if I can believe her this time, because he may have money, but how long does that stay there?
I get that line of thinking, but I think circumstances are way different than they were before.
Yeah,
if he goes out and he signs some big free agents, and they come on the books, he's still got a farm system that he can use to supplement that. Before, it was kind of like their farm system was their major league team. They didn't really have much of a farm system to then supplement that team with, and then they had to go out and sign free agents. Now it's kind of the reverse order, where they need to sign those free agents. They still have the farm system in place. It doesn't make sense to me to get yourself in a position where you can right now, you can pay money for players and still have those free agents, to bring up into the system, to bring up to the major league team, to trade if you want to trade them, if you need them. But
prospects. You said free agents. You're talking about
prospects.
Right?
Sorry.
Okay. I'm just making sure, because I was like, wait, where the hell are we going here? Okay.
Yeah, but and so it's like back when the Cubs in 2015, 2016, their prospects were on their major league team, right? And they were left with just a few really good prospects who they ended up trading away for a few major league, Jose Quintana and the closer over the 2016.
Aroldis Chapman.
And
then Wade Davis, they traded.
Yeah. And so they got some decent talent. Quintana was a bust, but at the end of the day, they've got a lot more in the bank, so to speak, with these prospects right now. And they have an opportunity and the money to go out and get these major league level, kind of extremely talented superstar level guys. And so it's like, yeah, I could see how maybe it got pulled. The budget got pulled from underneath them before with the Bryce Harper deal, but he can go out and sign Carlos Correa now.
Oh yeah.
And I can't imagine that his market is getting, as time goes by, is getting any stronger. Or Dansby Swanson, which Swanson is a decent signing, but it's like
you got to do so much more.
If he could have signed Vasquez, then yeah, Swanson's okay, and then you still need to do some more.
You go add Justin Turner, JD Martinez, some veterans who are on short-term deals who can give you a little bit of punch. But
and then you've got a team that can at least compete for the playoffs. But it's like right now, what are you going to do? You're going to just sign Carlos Correa? I'd be surprised if the Cubs sign Correa, but it's just as things start to unfold here, it just really seems like the Cubs options are fewer and fewer and make less and less sense than they did before all these signings started to happen. And that's really the problem.
Yeah. And so my other issue with, if that, and I think there's something with Hoyer, like part of it, I think, is he's like fundamentally opposed to a long-term deal like that.
He's a small market GM. That's what the way he's running the Cubs is the way you would run San Diego, Milwaukee.
Right. Well, the way you'd run San Diego, they've got $1 billion in shortstops.
I know,
and
San Diego's out there being run like the Cubs should be run.
Right, but what's funny, why is San Diego a small market? Is it just because all the media goes to LA? Because San Diego's a big ass city. It's definitely like a top 15 city, if I'm not mistaken. It's
small market because they just don't have that big of a fan base.
Right. I think that's kind of the thing, is that we talk media market. When people say market, it's not necessarily how many people are in the area, because again, the relative proximity to LA is such that it pulls some of that. But where I really struggle with the Hoyer thing is twofold, right? If indeed he is either opposed to a huge deal, right? Which appears to be the case. I mean, they've spoken about that. Or if he's scared about the money kind of being gone, I look at two different things. The first of which is that the Cubs right now have about 66, 67 million, depending on what you trust. And a lot of this is based on arbitration estimates, right? So we could see that fluctuate. I think they're at 175, 176.5 right now. If you go by roster resource on Fangraphs, which I kind of prefer at this point, I think their information seems to be a little bit better. Against a luxury tax, we assume they will not get to it. In terms of it's 233, right? 233 million is that first luxury cap threshold, which they're not going to surpass. But that still gives them what, 54 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, 53.5 million. You can sign Correa for a lot less than that, right? But even if he's 40 million, you can go out and add another guy at 10 and still have a little bit of money left in there, right? So we've got that. You can do that. But what's even bigger, and if you're worried about the money being turned off, well, after next season, Kyle Hendrick, 15 million falls off. Jason Hayward, 22 million falls off. Jan Gomes, 6 million falls off. Cody Bellinger, 17.5 falls off. If they don't do an extension with Ian Happ, his money of about 10 million or so for this next year will also fall off. Marcus Stroman is only set to make 21 million on his player option for 2024 and could very likely turn that down. If he has a decent season, I could absolutely see him turning. They could have $80 million or more, 90 million falling off the books from whatever their number is this year.
Yeah.
90 million is enough to go sign Shohei Ohtani and Devers or Machado or another star. I mean, like, that's 90 million is more than a lot of teams are paying total in payroll, which is absurd in and of itself. But still, we look at it. So that's the one, right? That's my big one. I'm like, who gives a crap if they're not going to give you more money if they say you're capped at 215? Okay, cool. You're getting a bunch more next year of room. The other thing is, though, and here's the deal. If you don't act now, Jed, what the hell makes you think you're going to be around to even make the decision with that extra money? If you don't go out and put out a winner and spend some money, now that they say you've got money to spend, we expect a contender next year, and you don't do it, you know, I mean, it's a lose-lose for him. But shit, if I'm him, I'm going to go out spending somebody else's money. I'm not going to go out and pocketing. This is like if any biblical scholars out there, it's like the parable of the talents, right? Where the boss leaves and he gives his servants a little bit of money to go and, spend. And the one's like, hey, I invested it in this and I made you some money. The one's like, I was so scared of what you're going to do. I took it and I buried it. And then the owner, the dude beat the guy and put him in jail. Which
well,
is like,
Jed's applying for the Cincinnati Reds GM position. So
apparently
he's got to build up that resume and show his thriftiness because it's not going to fly in Chicago for much longer. That's for sure.
It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I know he talks about threading the needle. I know that obviously there's the worst case scenario.
Why are you in Chicago,
right,
as the GM of the Cubs saying thread the needle? That should not even be in your vocabulary.
Well, and part of that goes to ownership, right? And they should have given him more. But if they're giving it to him, and you're sitting there thinking that that's like a monkey's paw, right? Which I think he's probably worried about. It's that if I spend and we don't win, then I'm done. But it's like, at least you tried. What's happening right now?
The one thing that Jed Hoyer has proven he can do in San Diego and in Chicago is build up the minor league system. He's very good at that.
Yeah, he's very good at sell trades. Very good at sell trade. Like, hey, the returns they got for those guys at the deadline last year, some of they got this year,
outstanding.
The return, but that's a Pittsburgh thing. That's what you should do as a GM in Pittsburgh. Is trading off the guys that you don't want to pay anymore.
And those guys don't equal major league talent. And that's the thing is you look at what he did in San Diego to build up their prospect system. I mean, they still had to go out and sign a bunch of free agents. I mean, the core of their team are guys that they ended up signing and trading for.
Yeah.
That's the deal, dude, is you build up the prospects because that's currency. That's money in the bank, right? I look at the minor league system as the bank of any major league team, right? That's your bank. You want to have as much money in that bank as you possibly can, but then you can't just sit on it, like you said, and bury it and not do anything. And that's what we're seeing happening here. And it sure feels like the Cubs aren't going to sign Carlos Correa. And I mean, I hate to say this, but possibly not signing Swanson. And if you don't sign either one of those guys, I just think, like you said, CubsCon is in a month and
Oof.
it's going to be a riot. And I don't mean like a fun type riot. I mean like the riot in which people are literally rioting. And, and if I'm Tom Ricketts, he knows that if he goes into CubsCon and nothing gets done before CubsCon, that he's going to be taking the brunt of the heat, and he doesn't want that. And he's going to look right at Jed Hoyer and blame him for that.
They're already doing it. That's why Kenny was on. Why else would the business operations president go live on the air and confirm the reports that they've got plenty of money to spend? What other purpose does that serve? And I'm being serious here too. I want to ask if anybody has any other thoughts, because I only see that as a way for them to set Hoyer up, not necessarily set him up to fail, but setting him up to be the scapegoat if things don't go right. Because Ricketts has taken all the heat for the spending, in the time since 2016-17, right? So these last 5-6 years since they won, and the payrolls have diminished. Actually, the payroll started dropping after 18, as I'd indicated before.
Yeah,
Ricketts has been the sole brunt of fans' ire, which is still more or less the case. This just feels to me like a very targeted plot, for lack of a better term, on the part of the business operations side and ownership side to take heat off of Tom Ricketts and put it anywhere else. And then that's the easy target. But then if I'm sitting there as Jed Hoyer, I'm like, what the hell, dude? Like, Crane Kenny's just driving that bus, man. Just getting him on. I just don't know what other purpose. Well, I guess I know that, the other purpose would be if they said, if we did want to say, hey, it wasn't as, malicious as trying to throw Hoyer under the bus, but it was more about trying to sell more season tickets, trying to convince people to get because they're still holding out. There's still people like they're stringing out those deposit deadlines like never before. They're calling people.
Yeah.
They're getting people who are on that wait list who are getting called 2 and 3 times off that wait list that they burned through. They are bleeding season tickets. We've talked about this before, but it's getting worse. And I got just a ton of response. Like, I put something out about that over the weekend, and that thing exploded on Twitter and Facebook and everything, with a lot of people saying the same things. Now, I gave up my season tickets. This is probably my last year. It's harder to find people to give them away. I've been called, I waited my whole life. I waited on this season ticket waiting list. It's the one thing I've wanted forever and ever and ever. And now that I can finally afford it, they call me, and I don't want to do it. I don't want to give them that money. I don't want to spend it. And so I know they are hurting. CubsCon, not sold out. That would typically sell out immediately, right?
Yeah.
And to the point where you had to purchase a hotel package to get the passes, right? You couldn't just buy weekend passes usually, or at least they would do that last. They would sell the hotel. They still have 1 night, 2 night hotel packages left. They have just the weekend passes for the Cubs, for the convention itself, all still available. And those have been there. How long has it been? 2 weeks? A month? Something like that. That it's been out there. It used to be like that day. I mean, it would be like just like when the tickets would go on sale for the regular season for single game tickets, they would open that up like on a Friday morning. They're gone on Friday. Gone. Now they're having to advertise it and put it out there. Like, people don't want to invest in that. You're going to have some diehards there, but I also suspect that you're going to have some folks that are going there specifically to give Ricketts a piece of their mind.
Yeah, to launch grenades, of course.
It could be very, very.
He's going to have to come up on the stage at some point, right? I mean, it may not be an entire session with him on the stage, but he will be on the stage.
Oh, the last time that happened, he was booed. Right.
And then he assured us that we wouldn't be booing Marquee Network, and yet here we are.
He was correct in that he said we wouldn't be booing it next year.
Yeah.
They didn't have a convention the following year. So he was technically correct there. However, I don't mind it at all. right? We got our passes through the team, to kind of cover it or whatever. But man, I'm just struggling to see where they're going to go with some of this. And I kind of wonder. I know I've seen some thoughts out there that like maybe Swanson's market fades a little bit once Correa signs. But I also wonder if he doesn't get even a little bit more juice, depending on where Correa signs. They're vastly different players, and so it's not as if you're really looking at one as a replacement for the other. And so I think that's maybe the difference there. But if a team truly is looking to upgrade big time up the middle,
Yeah.
if they had earmarked 350 for Correa, do they mind going 200? I mean, that's still an overpay for Swanson, but
Russ Dorsey just tweeted moments ago, the market for shortstop Dansby Swanson has begun to heat up. Sources tell Bally Sports in the stadium. Teams that are in on Swanson sweepstakes include the Dodgers, Giants, Twins, Cubs, Red Sox, and Braves.
It's a lot of teams.
And that was tweeted 10 minutes ago. So, I mean, and then, so like, what's the conversation around Carlos Correa? Like I mean, this is just, oh man, this is turning into a mess. And the thing is that if the Cubs, who are they going to sign beyond this? They're going to have to, and I hate the trade avenue when you've got free agents available and you can spend cash instead of, your prospects. That just makes so much more sense to me, and from a team perspective, just from a budget perspective. And like you said, I mean, next year we could have $80-90 million falling off. It's just,
right.
It's just, but when you add it all up, it's just, it adds to a number. And then, but the number that you see from the Cubs is like totally different, and it's just confounding. It just doesn't make any sense.
And who's out there? Who's out there that's available even who would move the needle from an offense? Sean Murphy, right? That looked like it could have been a really good. And for the life of me now, I understand that different teams evaluate, like we, right, the group of us in the public will evaluate things a certain way, because for the most part, like, I know there's people who follow the minor leagues really, really closely and know all the different prospects and everything, and they've got a better handle on some of these than others. But it's really tough for me to look at some of these and look at that deal that happened yesterday, and I'm going, wait a minute. So the Braves already got Olson from the A's last year for a haul that looked way lighter than anybody would have expected. And then they go, and it sure didn't feel like they gave up a whole lot to get Murphy.
They did
from the A's. Plus, Milwaukee came out of it with William Contreras, who's the second best piece in the whole deal. Like, I don't know how. Now, again, the A's value players a little bit different. They're very, very, very good at player evaluation. They always have been. That's the reason why they're able to even be successful, even though it is abhorrent to me that they even fired their manager rather than pay him another extra $1 million.
Yeah, but they always feel like they're on the wrong end of a trade. The A's are good at evaluating talent when they're signing guys and they're drafting. But what they seem to be is they're always trading away talent, and then they just don't get a good return. I mean, the Cubs have fleeced them. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, and the whole thing too, of course, part of the reason they're doing this is because they just want to get payroll as low as possible. And
exactly.
I know there's still talk about trying to get a stadium finance there, but owners, I mean, they've got their AAA team in Vegas already. I know there's talk about them having a plot of land out there and trying to move to Vegas. I think that's what Major League Baseball wants them to do. That would suck for Oakland, but I'm hard pressed to see a future in which Oakland or the A's aren't in Las Vegas within the next 5 years. But but again, a deal like that, and it was funny because as soon as the news broke, and I was only kind of half joking, but I was like, something tells me, like, why do I feel like we're going to see the return on this and wonder why the Cubs weren't able to do something like that? And it's to say, like, that's oversimplifying it, right? We can't just say, hey, if the Cubs would have given Christian Vasquez $32 million, he would have come there. I mean, the Twins are in a better position to win. Even without Correa, I'm better than the Cubs. I mean,
they weren't that much better than the Cubs last year. They didn't.
Yeah, but the AL Central still sucks too. I mean, the NL Central's rough, but like the Cubs right now are worse than what they were last year on paper right now. I mean, so are the Twins without Correa. But if they're saying, I mean, the Twins are in the, again, they're hot after him. They might be able to bring him back. I don't know, but if you compare those, and maybe players talk. Maybe they don't like the way the Cubs have been treating guys. Maybe they don't like how Cubs have been lowballing people. And maybe the Cubs didn't offer anything, right? Same thing with Senga.
That's
Kodai
another
Senga,
one that just
5
totally
years,
makes
$75 million.
no sense.
Well, it makes sense in that the Mets
million.
are throwing around money, and he's saying, well, shit, I can go win. These guys are spending $400 million. They're trying to win. I'm going to go pitch there. I think we'll win 100 games.
You got Suzuki. Here's a guy from Japan, that makes, we've talked a lot about Suzuki and the transition for any Japanese player coming to Major League Baseball, having to deal with a completely different culture, having to get, used to being in a place that's just totally foreign to them. And can't you sell the fact that you've got Suzuki on the team and Wrigley Field and, all the things that the Cubs should be selling to a guy who took 5 years, $75 million for a $15 million AAV? That just seems incredibly cheap.
Yeah. And that was the exact prediction that MLB Trade Rumors put out there. And I had assumed, and I saw some that were like even lower, some of them maybe had gone to 6. I'm like, why not just do like $80 million for 4 years? Right? Pump it up. Now, part of that too is he's got an opt-out after 2 years, right? He gets to pitch alongside two of the greats in the game. I think there's a lot of value props there that the Mets can offer. But then again, I look at that and I'm thinking, are the Cubs not even in the conversation with these guys? Are they offering the same? Are they offering more and getting turned down because this is no longer the team that was able to lure free agents to it for less money, right? Whether that's Ben Zobrist or John Lackey, or even Jason Hayward again, because he could have gotten more somewhere else because they bought into what was going on. But the narrative has changed. And I know that a lot of the guys who were there with the team talked about wanting to stay. Contreras talked about it. Happ has discussed it. Drew Smiley talked about it. But at the same time, I'm like, they're saying that, but, Smiley's still gone, right? They were supposed to negotiate something. Did the team just come back with a shit offer for him? I don't know. Contreras is still gone and talked about how when he saw Pujols hitting those home runs, he was envisioning himself as a Cardinal. And I know you got to pander to your new team and you got to pander to your existing team and things like that. But I don't know, man. I'm sitting here struggling. I think the Cubs can't just go out and meet the market. They've got to exceed the market at this point. I think they have to overpay and give a premium to bring in top-level free agents who are –
and they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. We've seen it over – since Hoyer has been with the Cubs, including his time with Theo, except for Jason Hayward, the Cubs just don't go out and overpay. And now they've got this – it's like the Mets didn't want to trade with the Cubs this year – for Wilson Contreras because they had the whole PCA thing in the back of their mind. And so now the Cubs going to continually have this kind of like gun shy thing because they can't go out and sign a free agent because they're so paranoid because of what happened with Hayward? I mean, you cannot, that's just right. If that's the way that it is, then Hoyer does need to be fired immediately.
I don't think it's just that. I think there is part of that, but I think it's less about how that deal itself soured and how it played into the whole dynamic that I had expressed before about ownership not giving them more money. But here's something, I can't remember if it was last week or a couple weeks ago that we talked about this, but what's really, really weird to me, the part that I'm having the hardest time of any of this wrapping my head around, it's not that they're not spending money. It's not that because they have added some players, right? But the problem is that the players they've added, every one of them, and I could go through and I'm going to go through this list, damn it. Every one of them indicates not only that the club wants to spend, but that it is admitting that it needs to spend more because none of the players they've added are like the central driving forces to competitiveness. They're all the exact players you would sign to help either complement or fill out an existing roster or with the knowledge that you have a bigger fish on the hook that you're pulling. So Wade Miley was the first one, right? They claimed him from the Reds and they picked up his $10 million option. You don't pay Wade Miley $10 million unless you're going to make bigger moves.
Yeah.
They get Drew Smyly, right? You don't get him without. They got Suzuki. That doesn't make any sense unless they're going to go add more because he's an unknown commodity.
I'll tell you where it makes sense. It makes sense because they want access to the Japanese market, which is a huge market, and they want to sell merchandise.
Marcus Stroman on a deal that he can opt out of within 2 years. That makes no sense if you're not trying to be competitive in that time. Cody Bellinger on a 1-year deal makes 0 sense if you're not trying to do something else around it. Jameson Taillon makes no sense if you're not adding an ace pitcher to that because he's just a very similar profile. Maybe they see some things they can bring out of him. I do see that. But that nothing they've done is indicative. Like they all speak to the next shoe to drop, but it's not. I'm looking at this going like it would all make sense if they did go out and they got Correa tomorrow or Rodon, less so because you can go get Rodon and you still have a shitty offense. Like that's the thing. We need pitching. This is the wildest thing to me though too.
The Cubs had great pitching last year.
Right. I have seen so many comments. They need pitching. They need pitching. They need pitching. No, they don't. I mean,
I think they're perfectly fine. They could stand pat. I don't even think they needed to add Taillon.
Right. No, but that's why I don't get it. They absolutely, their offense is for shit. It was shit last year and they lost their best hitter, arguably, right?
Exactly.
At a premium position where they're going to replace him with somebody who's far worse, more than likely. And if you get Swanson, we're talking about a dude who's got a career 94 WRC plus. His career high of 116 was just set last year, and that's 14 points below the average that Correa has for his career of 130. Like or maybe it was Bogarts. Either way, they're both in the same area. But like that's the problem. It's like none of this, it feels like people say, oh, you can't just go spend just to spend on Correa. Are you kidding me? Right now they're spending just to spend on Taillon. Like, yeah, is he help there? Swanson, would he improve the team? Yeah, absolutely. But does he make them a contender? No. Taillon, does he help solidify things with the rotation? Is he a guy who's probably more dependable than the other, injured / unproven players they've got in there? Yes, but his upside is really limited, if you ask me. That's what I'm really struggling with more than anything. It's not like they haven't added players. They have, some of whom could be significant contributors, solid middle, mid-tier type free agents. That's what all these guys are.
That kind of guys that the Cubs needed in 2017, 18, and 19.
That's when they traded for.
They just wanted to show that they can sign those guys.
Right. When they traded for Quintana, they thought they were getting a number 2 to maybe number 3 pitcher, starter who could slot in there and solidify. Instead, they got a number 4 to 5. Right. So like you've got where Steele, you could see at his peak being kind of that ace type. I still think number 2 is kind of his ceiling, but he's got to stay healthy. Right. Stroman, not a full on ace, 2 to 3. Hendricks has been like a 5 at best the last couple seasons.
Yeah.
Maybe that recovers. Wisniewski, maybe a 2, maybe even better. Taillon's like a 3. Maybe Plateau's at a 2. Again, there's no number 1.
They acknowledged, was it after last year when they said they needed power arms?
Yeah.
And who have they signed?
They've acknowledged that forever. Nobody.
Name one power arm.
Taillon averages 94. So relatively speaking, he has more of a power arm
compared to 89.
They've got pretty much, whenever he's at 92, 93, I don't see anything in this. What I see is a strategy that speaks to we're setting up, like I said, those mid-tier and those ancillary role-playing pieces. We're getting all of that in place. The only way it makes sense is if you then add the big piece, ace pitcher, star power hitter. And I don't necessarily mean power hitter, but a hitter with star power. That's the only way it actually makes sense. And it's by all accounts, it's not going to happen. So what are they doing?
I don't know, but it's funny because the Cubs have systemically ushered every single member of that 2016 World Series championship team out the door, including Wilson Contreras. They let Contreras then go sign with the Cardinals. They didn't let him, but you could have seen the writing on the wall. And the only player left on the Cubs is Hendricks, and there's another person that's left on the Cubs, and it's Jed Hoyer. And it's just, to me, if you're going to usher 2016 out the door, and you're doing all of this, and you're still in the position that you're in, I mean, you feel like you should have been in a better position at this point for sure. And I don't know how they can possibly be relying on the minor league guys to come up and make an impact at the major league level this year. And so that's 2-3 years off into the future. It just seems like if Hoyer doesn't get something done here and the Cubs are bad, I'm concerned, because what I don't want to have happen is Hoyer to not really make any signings, the Cubs to come out and be awful, and then for Hoyer to still be in place, and he starts to trade off some of the Cubs pieces.
Right, because it's going to have to happen again, right? Like if they
I don't want
again,
that to happen.
If they suck again, then what are you doing? You're having it, and you don't extend Hap. Well, Hap's going to be traded, and they're probably going to have to trade Stroman. And now you're left starting back at square one, to where you not only do you have to go and spend all of that money still to bring in new guys, but you've also got to replace Hap and Stroman and Gomes.
And that's the problem. And so to me, it's like, I think the timing would be weird, because you let kind of Hoyer go through this whole off season. But if depending on what team you come into spring training with, is there a possibility that Hoyer could be fired if he doesn't sign Correa before spring training?
No, I don't think they'd can him that early.
That's what I'm saying. At what point? What's the earliest that they could fire Hoyer? That's not the end of the season. That makes any sense. It'd have to be
like halfway, all-star break. It had to be before the trade deadline, because you don't want the outgoing guy making trades. But I think if it would be at whatever the point is, right? Because there's an inflection point in every season at which you realize, usually, unless you're
like
kind
of
hanging
end of
on,
May. I mean, right. Basically, right?
Or if you're like the Braves, though, the Braves didn't completely, they were about to give up on the season, and it would have happened right before, because they made that trade at the All-Star break for Jock Peterson. And then there was a thought at the time that he'd get flipped again, because the Braves might have fallen out of contention. Instead, they went, they caught fire and won the World Series. But, I think at whatever that point is where you say definitively, we're not going to compete this year, if that's the case, and if it is as a function, now, it would be different. Okay, they go out and they sign Correa, and then something happens, there's an injury or whatever, and they're lagging around third place. But at least you've got, let's look at two different situations. The teams in the NFL that are currently tied, and the Broncos have the tie break, right, with the Bears and Broncos. Okay, both awful teams, both in need of a ton of help, both have ostensibly franchise quarterbacks in place. The difference is the Bears franchise quarterback is only in his second year, and they have $125 million in cap space and a ton of draft picks. The Broncos franchise quarterback, they gave up a crap ton of draft picks and signed him to a monster deal, and he sucks, right? and you don't have a whole lot of help that he can continue to get better.
I tend to think that has a lot to do with coaching, but
there is a lot to do with that as well. Nathaniel Hackett should probably not be coaching an NFL football team. Anyway, but I say that, and the comparison does not hold, because I'm talking about getting a big money player, and if that the point is that you can look at those two situations, and on paper their records are the same, but in actuality the situations that they're facing are vastly different. Similarly, if you're looking at a Cubs team that does not go out and get any major players right now, that doesn't meaningfully add any long-term talent to the team, because they haven't so far, and they're shit, now you're going, okay, Jed, what have you done to add talent to this team, like known commodities, Major League Baseball players that can help us with this team? He's like, well, I got Stroman. Well, yeah, but we got to trade him. Well, we got well. No, you didn't. You drafted Hap, but you're gonna have to trade him. Well, we got Tyon. Okay, yeah. There's one. Okay, you got one pitcher. Well, Suzuki. Yeah, well, he's kind of struggling again, second year man, but that's only one outfielder. Hey, I got Cody Bellinger. Yeah, guess what? He's only on a 1 year deal. He's gone. So now you're gonna say we want to keep this GM in place who refused to spend money, who didn't do anything about it then,
Yeah,
and now you're gonna give him more money to not spend? Hell no.
That 1 year deal for Bellinger doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because what are you really doing there?
Right.
I mean,
what was the point?
You want him to perform well. The reason you sign a guy like Cody Bellinger is because he's got a tremendous amount of upside. And so you want to tap into that upside and then benefit from that upside for multiple years. Instead, the Cubs are setting it up so he can have that upside and he can do really well next season, and then he's gone. That signing makes no sense. You don't want it for
multiple years. You're looking at saying, hey, if we suck, we can flip him. If we do what we think we're going to do to try to be competitive, it was a simple deal. We're bridging the gap to Pete Crow Armstrong. And so it's this 1 year thing. It's a position of need.
Yeah, but still, if he comes up, like you said, you could flip him. I mean, he doesn't need to be, if you're thinking trade deadline flip, then that mentality, it needs to be done.
Right.
There's no reason they're thinking that.
And I think that was the back. I think the ideal situation, and I could be wrong, right? The ideal is, hey, you go out there, you land another one of these big stud shortstops. You get this is after Jose Abreu was already gone, but you get yourself a catcher, you get yourself a third baseman, whatever. Mervis comes up and hits really well. Suzuki does better. Hap solidifies. If these things you've created for yourself a potential for these things to break the right way and to be competitive, and at that point, you can allow Bellinger to move on because you've got a center fielder coming in to take his place. Ideally, things go well next year, right? But if things don't go well and Bellinger does okay, then you can flip him. And if things don't go well, there's no such thing as a bad 1 year contract.
Well, and PCA is just a prospect at this point. He's a great prospect. We all love him, but
the glove plays. The glove plays. That's the difference. He doesn't need to come up and hit.
Played.
But he doesn't need to. The glove plays.
He gets injured.
Okay. He might die. I don't know. He might die in a car accident.
I mean, I'm just saying with the prospects, you know what I'm saying? It's just until they get to the major leagues, until they actually start showing in Major League
if that drops off in a year, that's $17.5 million. If something happens to him, you can still go out and then sign somebody again next year.
Like the Cubs are this year.
Right. Well, that's the problem is like that move makes sense if you're going to add more pieces around it to make it make sense. Right? This is all a puzzle. And you're like, I can't see what this piece looks like. But once I have these others, it fits.
This is the ultimate unsolvable puzzle where it's like 5 puzzles that have been mixed together, but you don't know that. And so you start building the puzzle and you're like, this should be really easy. But what are these pieces over here? And why are they in this puzzle?
Yeah. It's like they gave you you bought it from the wrong, the whatever, the jacked up section of stuff, the clearance pile, because it was missing 15 pieces, right? Like, I can see, because you can see that on the puzzle. Sometimes you can see a little picture. I haven't done a puzzle in a minute. Usually I do one like over Christmas break or whatever, right? But you can see one and you're like, I can see where this is on the box. I can tell where this piece goes. So I'm going to go ahead and set this right here in the middle. But shit, I can't find any of the other pieces around it that make it make sense within this picture. And unless I add those pieces, it doesn't matter that I put this one in position. I need all the others to make it work. And Jed Hoyer's just like randomly kind of slopping pieces. Like he's got the outside, right? He's got the border done. That's the way that works. And he's just like throwing random pieces across, just wherever. And is refusing to go look at it to see. I'm like, what picture are you looking at? Because I don't know where the hell you're going with this. Please, Jed, make it make sense. Make it make sense for me. Because right now, I am really struggling to see a path down which we can walk that we're like, okay, I get it. I get where this was going this whole time. Good long play, Jed, because I don't feel like that's where we're going.
Yeah, it's anyone's guess where we're going and what the plan is, and that's the hardest part is like trying to decode the Cubs' plans for the future, and whether Jed Hoyer is kind of on board with what is really the reality of what's happening in Chicago, on the north side of Chicago, I should say. is yeah, it's kind of depressing, and it's hard to take as a Cubs fan where, we went through kind of, tearing down the core and the emotions that come with that. And then, going through what was the rest of that season and then all of last season. And then, wanting to have hope and hearing a message from the front office that, that we can understand, that makes sense, but then not seeing the pieces put in place. It's, it's, I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over again, but it's all we can do because it's what's happening with the Cubs. And unless something strange happens, it's hard to say. I mean, Patrick Wisdom at third base, is he our third baseman?
Right now, him
He's
and
30,
Morel.
32 years old or something.
I mean,
And Morel he's our third base. I mean, he's the third base of the team that is going to compete in the NL Central. He's the third baseman.
I'm not nearly as high on Morel in general as most people apparently
He was fun.
are.
He was a fun story in the middle of a really terrible season.
Yeah.
That's it. He came in, he hit a grand slam. It was awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, but and here's the thing: is I get like serious Junior League vibes off of him for that reason. Where I'm like, hey, it's a fun story with an otherwise crappy team, and there are some things he does really well, but there's a lot of things he doesn't. And I think one of the things he does really well is to be versatile. I don't know, and people are like, oh, let him play here but I don't see any position where I'm like, yes, I can take. Do I want Chris Morel every day in center field? No. Do I want him every day at third base? No. Do I want him every day at second? No, because what I want is for them to sign a freaking shortstop and put Nico Horner at second base. I want Chris Morel being able to play all over the diamond at whatever point, give people a break, smaller sample there. I just don't know that he is a consistent player at any one spot, and that's fine. Yeah. He doesn't need to be because they've got other guys that'll come up, and you figure that out. And maybe he ends up being a piece. I was hoping he'd be, part of it. He and Alexander Canario or something like that might be traded. But there again, you have to find a willing partner who also looks at that and values those people. Oh, that's a good comment that's in there. Have Morel take over Bodie's role. That would be nice, actually. To kind of just, again, be that utility infield guy who can actually flex out to the outfield as well. But in order to do that, you have to have better players in place at every
right now. He's the third baseman. Unless it's Patrick Wisdom, a guy who bats basically 200.
Yeah. Drury. I like Drury. Was Drury? I don't even remember. I have written so much over the last 2 weeks. I think I wrote something about Drury, and then a bunch of people, that'd be still a bargain basement again. I'm like, what do you consider a bargain basement? Because he, his value is actually fairly high after having a good season. But it's hilarious because a lot of people, if it's not the top flight, and it's like they moves players that move the needle. I'm like, okay, you can't get 9 needle movers.
The Cubs don't sign players that move the needle,
right? Obviously not. Well, I mean, unless they had Sammy Sosa, he knew about needles. But maybe they could bring him back at Cubs convention. That might get people going. Jeez.
It would distract everyone at least.
Can you imagine that? They announce him out there like, hey, everybody, look over here. Pay no attention to what's actually going on with the regular team. Let's focus on the Hall of Famers. You know what I mean? That's what they're going to do because they announce everybody at the beginning of the thing like it's a distraction. But if Ricketts gets up there and gives a monologue, it is it'll be absolutely hilarious because
chorus of boos, and there's still no schedule out for CubsCon. I checked this morning.
Yeah, aren't they supposed? No, I think what's today? I think they're releasing it on Thursday, right? That's the 15th.
That should be fun.
So they're doing little previews. They're sending out
a walk
the
down
emails.
memory lane. Let's celebrate the 2016 World Series championship, shall we?
Yeah,
again.
We ain't got shit else to talk about, and Lord knows, oh man, but yeah, again, there is, I think the most frustrating part, I would hate it, absolutely abhor it, if they were just refusing to spend money, right? Openly saying, we're going to try to find value or whatever. Not that teams normally do that, but that they weren't involved in any of these talks, that they weren't putting out there that they're trying to spend, that they continued to say, hey, we're even if the front office was saying, or not the front office, but the business operations saying, you know, we just got to be really careful with our spending, things like that, right? Because then at least I would know, I would be able to be angry with them about what the hell are you doing? Why are you being stupid about this? Versus where it is now, where I have no idea what is actually supposed to be happening. What is the plan here? Because
is it to win baseball games, or is it just to get as much money out of us as you possibly can? Because it feels right now like it's just to get as much money out of us fans as you possibly can. And that's not even working.
No, and that's the thing, is like, y'all realize that if you want to get fans to start spending more money again as a team, you damn well better start spending, because a lot of people, well, you don't spend big. Again, I am amazed. In addition to the number of people that have told me the Cubs need pitching, is the number of people that said, don't spend money on free agents now. Wait until more of the prospects are ready. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? They are bleeding money so badly from a revenue perspective, from a lack of revenue perspective, right? They're making money, but they're not making nearly as much as what they could, and they're losing season ticket holders. They're losing attendance. They're missing out on tons of concessions and other ancillary revenue that if they go another year of this, if they truly do kind of effectively punt on this offseason, that's just going to be real. I mean, fans are at a breaking point, a lot of them right now. And I know people will come back if they do start spending again and doing big things. But I'm amazed by the number of people that say, don't go spend on free agents. Don't commit that long-term money. Don't, like, what are you talking about? That is the dumbest thing. Why are you concerned with how much profit Tom Ricketts makes in a year? How much money is being put toward payroll by the Cubs or any other team? Those long-term contracts are no, they're not. If they sign Carlos Correa, that is not affecting how much you pay for your tickets. First of all, the Cubs have already announced their ticket prices for next year. Second of all, did the ticket prices go down when payroll dropped after 2018? No, they did not. They continue to go up. There is not a direct correlation between player payroll and ticket prices. It's just not there. And it's amazing that people, and here's what I love. I'll say that somebody, well, where's the money come from then? I'm like, are you serious? Where's the money come from? Have you seen how much they're making from TV? Come on, man. But here's a quick exercise. If tickets average $50 a piece, and you want to sell 3 million, which the Cubs won't, but you want to sell 3 million seats, right? That's 150 million, right? That they would be just gross revenue from ticket sales. If we just do really simple, right? So if you raise that by 5%, okay, that's what is that? $2.50, right? 250 times 3 million. So that's pretty good though, right? That's like what, 60 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, right? And then another, is that even 90 million? That's a lot of money, right? 3 million times 2.5. Well, no, it'd be 60 and then another 63 million, whatever it is. But then you cut that in half because your operating costs go up as you have more people, all that stuff. So you make about $30 million extra. But then, of course, that all goes to some other things as well. So $30 million. So maybe that would theoretically buy you one player, a 5% increase. But the Cubs aren't selling 3 million tickets, right? They were closer to 2.6. And that was the, so now you drop that down and drop. Anyway, that one player, right, is not causing that. The ticket revenue, and even if they were, right, that if you think that the ticket revenue is what the team uses to say, oh, well, we sold 3 million, so now we can afford $150 million budget this year. That's not how that works, folks. I'm sorry to have to break that to you for those of you who have continued to cling to that belief. But it just ain't the way it works. So go spend, Tom. I don't know. Or Jed. Go spend Tom's money, Jed. Somebody, please, for the love of God. Carter Hawkins, take control. Tie Jed up. Put him in the closet.
You might get your wish.
Yeah, well, it may happen. Somebody Oh yeah, hi, this is Jed. I think you just have to say I think a lot at the beginning of every sentence, and they'll believe you're Jed. Because if you listen to him, he'll probably watch this and then be mad that I said, but I've brought it up in like 4 or 5 times that I've written about his quotes, and I'll bring that up. Every sentence begins with I think. Scott Boras does the same thing, and so do I, unfortunately, because it's now been caught in my head. But somebody needs to go out there and spend some money. Because this is just
anybody, not me, not us,
right? No,
because we've already done that.
Yeah, that's been. Oh my god, and I'm just it'll like I said, I'm interested to see what happens. I'll continue to hold out a little bit of the benefit of the doubt for them, right, until such time as Swanson and Correa are both gone. But whew,
After that,
it
is a literal riot. that I think, it's a call for Jed Hoyer's head. It's a call for a lot of different things. And I mean, here's the thing is that maybe he lucks out. Maybe the Cubs come out and play really well the first half of the season. It's hard to imagine with the roster that they currently have in place, but they sign some of the guys like JD Martinez or whatever, or Drury, and maybe they play, kind of above the level that you would predict. But short of that happening, which seems unlikely, it's
I don't like it, man.
There's too much of this going on. So it'd be nice to have a team that was good again. That's the whole idea.
That would be nice, especially in a crappy division,
Yeah.
where well,
we'll see. Well, I mean, now the Brewers are good.
Well,
they've added some good pieces, right?
Somebody had to, I guess.
Yeah, so they're looking smart, and
Cardinals are adding, right? I mean, I'm looking at Cardinals were able to trade for Goldschmidt, trade for Arenado, sign Contreras, right? I mean, of course, it helps when you get when you absolutely fleece people on the deals. Like they didn't have to give up crap to the Diamondbacks to get Goldschmidt. They got Denver to pay them $50 million to take Arenado. You know what I mean? Like, it's just wild. Although finally, at least they didn't get a comp balance pick this year for the first time in forever. So that was kind of nice. But it's just, that's the part that's frustrating. Not so much losing Contreras. Like I'm not nearly as I know a lot of people are like more broken up about that or just really hated the idea. I was never all that tied to him, but at the same time, right? It's you just lost your catcher to your primary division rivals. And that just stinks because it's not just a money thing. We knew they were moving in different directions, but if you were going to allow that to happen, which they clearly did, not only did you not replace that, or have you not replaced that at catcher, you've not replaced that offense, period. You've done nothing to replace that offense because Bellinger can't be counted on to do it, you know? And so that's the part that really bugs me is like you had an offense with Contreras that sucked, that you admitted was bad and needed to be improved. And so then you
let him go.
You lost one of your best hitters off of an offense that was already bad and haven't done anything to replace it. Like that they're running.
There's no logic here. Stop trying to be logical.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That just, but man, I'm in a real tough time trying to swallow this.
Yeah, we all do. So anyways, we'll see what happens over the next week or two. I mean, we're coming up against Christmas. So I would say that, looking out, just looking at our schedule, we'll see what happens. If anything happens within the next week, I suppose we can go. If we're just kind of the same old's going on, we don't need to kind of have a repeat episode of today, which, it's after a while, you just want to just talk about something different. So we'll see where we're at. It could be a couple, 2-3 weeks before we do another episode again, depending on what happens with the Cubs. So hopefully something happens in the next week and we actually have something optimistic to talk about when it comes to the Cubs.
Yeah, because if they don't, we're just gonna get on here bitch about the same things. Just be the same show on repeat. Just watch this show again next week. It's fine.
Yeah, it's what the Cubs are. They're just the same show on repeat.
Ugh.
So not a good show. Anyways, thanks for joining us, everybody. It's been good. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you when we see you.
Go.